The knock came at 10:47 on a freezing Thursday night, just when I had finally convinced myself that being alone was easier than being disappointed again. I opened the door expecting an emergency, a package, or maybe a neighbor complaining about the music I wasn't even playing. Instead, there stood my neighbor, Claire Bennett, wrapped in a soft blue robe, her damp hair resting against her shoulders, and an expression on her face that I had never seen before. She glanced toward my backyard, then back at me, and quietly said, "You're not getting in that hot tub alone." For a few seconds, neither of us moved. I didn't know it then, but that strange sentence was about to become the beginning of the first real second chance I had been given in years. Before we continue, if you believe people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Studio. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change the direction of an entire life. My name is Daniel Carter, and at 34, I had become very good at pretending I was fine. From the outside, my life looked ordinary. I had a steady job repairing commercial equipment, a modest house, a reliable truck, and a backyard with a hot tub that had been sitting unused for almost a year. But after my fiancée, Emily, left me 3 weeks before our wedding, the house had become painfully quiet. She had taken most of her belongings, but somehow the silence she left behind felt heavier than anything she could have carried out the door. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped answering calls. Even simple things like cooking dinner seemed pointless when there was nobody across the table to ask how my day had been. The hot tub had been one of Emily's ideas. She used to talk about sitting under the stars after long workdays, listening to music while the steam rose into the cold air. After she left, I couldn't look at it without remembering everything I had lost. Yet that evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I decided I was tired of letting an object control my memories. I cleaned it, filled it, and switched on the heater. I told myself I was going to sit outside for 20 minutes, clear my head, and then go back inside. I never expected Claire to knock. Claire had moved into the house next door 6 months earlier. We had exchanged polite greetings, borrowed a ladder once, and occasionally waved from our driveways, but that was about it. She seemed friendly without being intrusive. She worked as a school counselor and often left early in the morning with a coffee in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. I had noticed that she lived alone, but I never asked why. There are some things you understand without needing to know the details. When I told her I was only going to sit in the hot tub for a little while, she looked at me with a strange mixture of amusement and concern. She said she had seen me carrying towels outside and figured I was planning to spend the evening staring at the darkness by myself. I tried to joke about it, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she admitted that she understood what it was like to sit in a quiet house and pretend loneliness was a choice. Her husband had died 2 years earlier after a sudden illness, and for months afterward she had struggled to sleep because the empty side of the bed made the room feel enormous. That confession changed the atmosphere between us. Suddenly, Claire wasn't just my neighbor in a robe standing on my porch. She was another person carrying an invisible weight. She asked if she could sit outside for a few minutes. I hesitated, not because I didn't want her company, but because I had forgotten how to let anyone get close enough to notice that I was hurting. Eventually, I stepped aside and let her in. We walked through the kitchen and into the backyard, where the cold air smelled faintly of snow and the warm water sent clouds of steam into the night. We didn't talk about romance. We didn't talk about our past relationships in detail. We simply talked. Claire told me about a student who had finally opened up to her after months of refusing help. I told her about the repair job that had gone wrong at work. She laughed at my terrible imitation of my supervisor, and for the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. Then she asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. She asked when I had last done something simply because it made me happy. I couldn't remember. The question stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, Claire became part of my routine without either of us announcing it. Sometimes she would leave a cup of coffee on my porch before work. Sometimes I would shovel the snow from her walkway before she woke up. On Friday evenings, we began sharing dinner between our houses. Nothing about it felt dramatic. That was what made it meaningful. There were no grand promises, no instant declarations, just two lonely people slowly discovering that companionship didn't have to come with conditions. But just when I began to feel hopeful again, Emily called. She wanted to meet. She said she had made a mistake and wanted to talk about starting over. Hearing her voice brought back memories I thought I had buried. For one painful evening, I considered everything she was offering. Familiarity. History. The possibility of repairing what had broken. When I told Claire about the call, she didn't tell me what to do. She simply listened. Before leaving, she said that forgiveness was powerful, but forgiveness didn't always mean reopening a door. Sometimes it meant finally accepting why you had closed it. That night, I sat alone in the backyard again. The hot tub was running, but I didn't get in. I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I was afraid of choosing loneliness because it felt safer than trusting someone again. The next morning, I made my decision. I met Emily and thanked her for the years we had shared, but I told her I couldn't return to a life that had already ended. It hurt. Even the right decision can hurt. But when I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Weeks passed. Winter slowly softened into spring. Claire and I continued spending time together, but neither of us rushed to label what was happening. One evening, she invited me to her house for dinner. After we finished eating, she showed me an old photograph of herself and her husband. She told me she had kept it because remembering someone wasn't the same as refusing to move forward. I finally understood what she had been teaching me all along. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant making room for something new. Months later, on another cold evening, I found myself standing beside the same hot tub where everything had started. This time, Claire walked into my backyard carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She smiled and asked whether I was planning to get in alone again. I smiled back and told her I had been hoping she would come. We sat beneath the stars, surrounded by quiet snow and rising steam. Nothing about that night was perfect. We still had scars. We still had memories. We still had fears about the future. But for the first time, neither of us was running from them. Claire reached for my hand, and I held hers. I realized that sometimes love doesn't arrive like fireworks. Sometimes it knocks softly on your door when you least expect it. Sometimes it wears an ordinary robe, carries a warm cup of coffee, and reminds you that your life isn't over simply because someone left. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be struggling with loneliness, and subscribe to Kindness Studio. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who might need their own reminder that better days can still come. And before we reach the ending, I have one special request. Comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that one painful chapter should never be allowed to decide the ending of an entire life. Daniel never forgot the night Claire knocked on his door. What began as an unexpected invitation to share a hot tub became something much bigger, a reminder that healing often begins when we stop pretending we don't need anyone. The past had taught them both how to lose. But together, slowly and imperfectly, they learned something far more important. They learned how to begin again.